Well, hello, and welcome to the tennis podcast on this fine Monday morning. And I do mean sort of fine Monday morning, or certainly relatively fine Monday morning, because I can see the sky from where I'm sitting, and I'm not sure that's been true for several days, if not weeks, here in London. David is here, still not over the Seahawks Super Bowl victory. How you doing, David?
No, never will be over it. We'll just keep on wearing merch items. I think I've probably got 52 weeks worth if I alternate. Pre 8 a.m. recording for the first time, perhaps in our history, unless you want to correct me otherwise.
Yes, because I have a dentist appointment to fix a chip that I sustained at 3 a.m. in Australia while eating some very depressing crisps in a sort of I had dinner 9 hours ago type situation. Matt witnessed it happen live.
I did. It was quite a dramatic thing to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning. But it is the sort of thing that does happen at 3 o'clock in the morning when you just want to go to bed, and yet something like that gets in the way. I feel like the only sort of time we've recorded at this time of day before is like after an Andy Murray against Kokkinakis at the Australian Open, except we're recording at this sort of time of day because we've not been to bed yet. For us to be waking up and recording this early feels new to me.
Yeah, I saw you, Matt, less than 12 hours ago. You're wearing the same
Did?
top. Have you
I am.
changed?
I have changed. I've showered. I've slept, but I did put my hoodie back on.
It's a great hoodie. It's a great hoodie. We have a lot to get into today, an awful lot to get into today. It is a packed show. So without further ado, let's head to Doha and the WTA 1000 event that concluded there on Saturday with a win, the first at this level for Karolina Muchova. She beat Victoria Mboko 6-4, 7-5 in the final. Not only her first title at this level, but only her second ever career title. Her first since 2019. This title was, long time coming. Doesn't even scratch the surface really for a player of her talent and ability. I'm not sure anyone in the tennis world would begrudge Karolina Muchova this title or wish it went to anybody else. Really, it was a very, very good vibe seeing her lift that trophy in Doha on Saturday, and perhaps David, evidence that Karolina Muchova has some fangs, or is at least sprouting some fangs.
Yes, and I don't think we have had really probably enough evidence over the years to know whether she had or not, because she's always got derailed by injury. There have been moments, I think, when she's led big matches and they've been overturned, but I've never thought, oh, here's somebody who hasn't got the stuff you need to win a big title. I've not really thought that. I've thought, here's a player with an incredibly complex game which needs to be packaged in a certain way. We've seen so many brilliantly adept tennis players who just have not figured out how to impose it reliably enough to win titles. And in her case, I just don't think she's had the run of good fortune with her body to be able to figure those things out until now. And listen, and it could be other little things, and also the sheer depth of competition. You said at the start, there's a lot to talk about here. This has been one of the great non-Grand Slam weeks of tennis that I can remember, just in terms of how much has happened, how many great performances have been put on. And with her winning this title and the manner that she did it, overcoming the players that she did, and playing the last three sets of tennis of the tournament, which made your heart sing. She was just awesome in the last three sets of this tournament. The final one she played against Sakkari, when Sakkari's playing really, really well, and she just takes her apart. And then she takes on Mboko, who's also just put in two of the most extraordinary performances of the year to get to the final, and she's just dismantled her as well. It's everything, isn't it? It's the slice, the volleys, the confidence to go forwards, the the power with the forehand. She's just got everything. And coached now by Sven Grunewald, I don't like to put cause and effect with anything, but I think that's obviously got off to a good start, and he's a very experienced coach with Sharapova and Konta and Andreescu and various others. But there's nobody in the sport that won't be happy that Karolina Muchova has just won a big title.
And this is a player, Matt, that how many months ago now was the US Open? 7 months ago. David interviewed her on the eve of that tournament for Tennis Podcast Meets, and our expectations of her were low at that time, and she barely was able to hit over her backhand. She was tentatively doing it at times, but basically she was in a Juan Martín del Potro situation, wasn't she, of not really knowing if she'd ever properly have a topspin backhand again. Okay, she's skilled enough that she has and had a lovely slice, but still to see that topspin backhand back is so heartening. I think I didn't think I'd ever see it again.
Yeah, I was quite worried about Muchova last year when she was going through that period over the summer, as you said, not hitting over the topspin backhand, because it just felt like, oh, maybe this is the one injury too many that she's not going to be able to get over. And I do think when we talk about fangs, it's a kind of term that's difficult to exactly define, but I do think a lot of it is related to belief and confidence. And I've always felt like with Muchova, just the constant injuries have slightly chipped away at that belief and that confidence. Like, can she fully trust her body to make it through not even a season, frankly, a tournament? There have been times where she's looked electric at the start, but by the end of the tournament, she's patched up and not quite able to play her best. And I think if you don't have full trust in yourself when you have that game that she has, which does rely on unpicking opponents and bringing so much variety to bear, if you're not quite sharp enough with that, you can be a little bit impotent against the very best players in the world. But actually, this week she was absolutely phenomenal. Like, touch wood, some of the fittest she's ever looked on court. Like, no strapping. You just trusted her to last the course in these matches, and she's using that variety as weapons. That's what I love about her. Like, she doesn't just come to the net. It's a proper strategy. It suits her game. She uses it to tactically impose herself on opponents. She does have everything in that sense. And there was a little moment in the final against Mboko where I was worrying about the fangs, where she had the love 40 in the second set, didn't take them, and Mboko played really well to save that game. And then Mboko broke in the very next game. And I thought, well, that's a big swing. Some big points there have gone against Muchova, but she regrouped really well and ended that match really strongly to end up winning it. And yeah, it's just great to see her lift a title like this. 76 months between her first and second titles on tour is an absolutely crazy statistic. It's been a whole pandemic in that time, and a lot more. And like, she's always felt sort of relevant when she's been fit and around. You've always felt like she should be winning titles, but I'm hoping, to go back to my point about belief, that a win like this really cements that for her, and she can build on this. As David said, there's so many good players. It is hard to win the biggest titles, and it was great to be back to our regularly scheduled programming of excellent WTA matches just across the board this week, after whatever the hell the second week of the Australian Open was a couple of weeks ago. But like, the field is strong, and she's not going to be winning these titles all the time, but she is absolutely a threat, and she proved it this week, and it was wonderful to watch.
The whole week in Doha, David, was an underlining, if it needed underlining, of what a disappointing crap aberration the Australian Open was on the women's side, right? Like, I did start to kind of gaslight myself a little bit post Australian Open. Like, was it really that bad? You know, are we being unfair? No, it was terrible, and we have good reason to expect things not to be terrible on the WTA side. And last week was evidence of that.
I can't believe matches are catching one way or the other, but my God, does it feel like they are sometimes? Because
I always think they do, David. I'm convinced.
It's like falls catching in the Olympic figure skating. It's a thing.
Yeah. It definitely feels infectious. The way things are taking hold, and the moment you had the matches start to get good. I mean, you know, my first note. I was writing notes throughout the week because you get to Monday and you're like, oh, I don't want to forget this moment. Well, my first moment that I noted down was Iga Swiatek against Janice Tien, and that was a week ago.
Second set of that was so good, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I wrote down, this is the closest I think stylistically I can imagine to what Barty against Swiatek would have looked like, that second set. Now, it was 6-3 Swiatek, but Jen was really taking it to her. She was hitting a lovely slice. She's hitting a heavily topspun forehand. She's serving well, and it was just a great watch. And I thought, oh, this bodes well. You know, this. I hope the tournament's going to go like. I mean, it just got so much better with every round. It just got incredible. And you know, you'd got Sakkari coming back to form and taking out Swiatek and playing tennis from years ago. You know, Rybakina's still doing Rybakina things. You've got the return of Jong after 5 months out, and then I mean, my favourite probably story of the lot, aside from Muchova, but it's just Victoria Mboko. She just takes my breath away. What she's done this week, the fact that she's having Mirra and Andreeva serve for the match, and yet I still felt Mboko was going to win because she just gives you that confidence that she's got confidence. You know, she's playing Rybakina at the end of the match there, and her 2 feet are halfway between the baseline and the service line against Elena Rybakina's serve, as if she's saying, look, I can take anything on right now. That's how good I feel. That's the sort of tournament we've just had, and it was so uplifting. And yes, the Australian Open was
She kept on going down early breaks, like right at the start of the match, Mboko, but had this sort of I don't know, like this zen, this attitude about her that suggested she was like a player of such greater experience than she actually is. Like, yeah, no big deal, whatever. I've got this. Almost like, what? Yeah, she lulls you into thinking that she's so much older and wiser than she actually is. I distinctly remember, Matt, you calling her during the Australian Open a work in progress. I remember you saying she's such a work in progress, Mboko, and I just, not to do her down, I know you're a huge fan of hers and her talent, but it just, you know, we thought of her as a very, very raw talent, even as recently as a few weeks ago. How much of a sort of fully formed top player do you think of her as now, and like how far off her potential do you think she is? I mean, she's already a top 10 player now as a result of this week.
Yeah, we've got 2 teenagers in the top 10 now for the first time since 2009. Now it's Andreeva and Mboko, and that was my match of the week, I think, Mboko and Andreeva. I loved seeing them in their developmental stage still, because I still think there's more to come from both of them. I do still think they are in a way flawed as players. They've got parts of their game that can still improve so much, and yet there's so much potential there, and shot making potential, and like there's not much baggage in the matchup, and it was just like exciting to see them play at this stage in their careers, especially coming off the back of the final they played at the start of the year, which was a real disappointment because Mboko wasn't really fit. Like, this felt like seeing them both come up against each other at their best, and it was a shame for Andreeva that it ended the way it did. Like, I think she's still got a bit of a composure problem in these matches, and this wasn't even one where you would say that the crowd really caused it, because that's sort of the one disappointment from Doha, is that the crowds are still not all that big for these matches. But she kind of lost her way, and she dumped some volleys in the net and got pretty down on herself, double faulted on the match point, and you're just looking for a bit more composure in these matches from Andreeva, and it's highlighted by what you said, Catherine, about how composed Mboko is. Like, from the start of these matches, there's a sense that she's got everything sort of under control, and she's also going to bring her best in the biggest moments. But it's like, go back to your question. I think I said that, and I stand by it, because we were talking about her as a potential opponent for Aryna Sabalenka. And I think we saw in that match, which, let's not forget, was only a few weeks ago. I do think Mboko has probably improved in those weeks, but not improved to the extent that we should be talking about her as like world number one material, in that, you know, Sabalenka was pretty comfortable in that matchup for the bulk of it. I know Mboko came on strong at the end, and I think probably the more she plays those sorts of players and matches, the more comfortable she'll become in those matchups straight away. But I still think there's a gap in terms of like how complete someone like Aryna Sabalenka is versus what more there is to come from Mboko, you know. But I definitely think she's worthy of being top 10. I mean, the runs she's had, reaching 2 1,000 finals now, winning one of them last year, like, she's shown that. She's shown that she absolutely belongs at the top of the sport. I loved that return position that she was adopting all week. That was so fun. So much firepower off both wings. She's brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. And I think she's only going up. I suppose the test for her now is like last time she had that really big breakout result in Montreal. There was then a little bit of a dip, wasn't there? I think she was injured a little bit as well at that time, and it sort of knocked her end of season last year. But, you know, again, another thing that separates the top players is the week in, week out consistency. You know, like, Iga Swiatek right now is not necessarily winning these sorts of events, but she's consistently getting to the quarters or semis, and therefore her ranking is staying high. For someone like Mboko, she's shown she's got close to the top level of the very best, but can she sustain it? I think so. I do feel like she's progressed in that sense since the latter half of last year. So absolutely belongs in the top 10, and what a person to have in the top 10. Like, that potential, that game, that personality. Like, everyone, I was watching a video today of all the players talking about their friends on tour, and everyone was citing Mboko. I think she's popular, you know, and yeah, I just she's such good news.
Can anyone explain to me why Gianni Infantino was present at the trophy ceremony? Anybody?
Not me.
Go away. Just leave tennis alone. Go away. A few other talking points, players to touch upon from the week in Doha. We've mentioned Swiatek. She lost out in a thriller, just an awesome match against Maria Sakkari, 2-6, 6-4, 7-5. Sakkari then lost out to Muchova in the semis. Lots of rumours circulating after this that Wim Fissette was maybe on sacking watch. I mean, it feels like he's been on sacking watch in and out pretty much since he was appointed as Iga Swiatek's head coach. The vibes between Swiatek and her box didn't look great to me, but it didn't necessarily look like it was directed at Wim Fissette, the eggy vibes. Maybe other members of the team sort of slightly tenser interactions. She's finally skipping an event, is Iga Swiatek. We got the news a couple of days ago that she's pulled out of Dubai, saying she's not mentally not mentally quite ready to play that, and that for sure feels like a good decision. The Athletics Monday morning briefing that they send around every week to their subscribers that are interested in tennis really focused in, David, on the Iga Swiatek serve and the fact that she's increasingly just not barely getting any free points on her serve, and that is then applying massive pressure to the rest of her game, which is falling apart more frequently than it used to. But perhaps that's because of the additional pressure that's being applied. And the suggestion in the briefing was that maybe she needs to look over at Carlos Alcaraz and the fact that he was in quite a similar situation with his serve not that long ago, and he is now a guy that, you know, we talk about as one of the best servers on tour, incredibly.
Yeah, and she referenced that herself in Australia. She referenced how, look, if I'm going to make changes to my serve, I'm going to have to take time off, and that'll mean missing big tournaments. Carlos seems to do it all the time with his serve, and she said it jokingly but somewhat enviously of how he's able to do that. And the point Charlie Eccleshare in the Monday morning briefing makes is that sometimes she'll race through a service game. She hit four love service games, and then others are absolute epics, and others she's losing her serve, and it's that lack of reliability. It's the lack of easier points that kind of make the rest of the game just flow. And I end up sort of a little bit lost as to, well, how come her scorelines used to be so lopsided a couple of years ago all the time? You know, she would just win so many easy matches. Yes, she would have some where she would just kind of career off the track in a way and not have any way to stop the runaway train. And therefore it has been this move with Wim Fissette to try to revert a little bit to what she used to be many years ago, with the variety and more control and more margin and more loft over the net sometimes, rather than just hitting the living daylights out the tennis ball. But she's stuck. She's a bit stuck still with that, and part of that seems to be, at least the point the piece is making, is that the serve just puts you on the back foot, and it puts doubts and question marks in your mind. This is still somebody who won Wimbledon a year ago, but she's just not had the same degree of reliability week to week.
Yeah, and crucially, as Matt is always pointing out, when she won Wimbledon, the serve became a weapon for that time. It's not like she kind of proved by winning Wimbledon that she can do it without the serve. I think the Wimbledon victory kind of underlines the current theory that she does need the serve to become a weapon.
And Cincinnati last year as well was another tournament where the serve was working for her. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a really hard time like adjusting my expectations of Iga Swiatek. Like, to me, I still go into every tournament feeling like she's probably the favourite or likely to win it, and therefore, like, whenever she loses, it still feels quite shocking to me, particularly when you see her lose to a Sakkari who recently, I know, like, back in the early part of Swiatek's career, Sakkari was a difficult opponent for her, but recently she'd really beaten Sakkari very convincingly, and even Kasatkina, who I know she ended up beating quite convincingly, but she lost the opening set, and that's not something that typically happens to her against Kasatkina. So these things are happening, and yet I remain shocked by them, and yet they keep happening. And I do think Wimbledon is a large part of the reason why I'm still shocked by these things, because we've seen her win a slam in the last year, but actually, if you do take the body of work from the last 18 months, Wimbledon is kind of the anomaly, and it's actually been tournaments a bit more like this, where she's ended up becoming a bit stuck with her game, as you talk about, and the serve hasn't been reliable. And I don't know, I don't really know week in, week out what to make of Iga Swiatek, and I cannot wait for the clay court season with her. Like, in my head, again, I'm going on history, and I've still got so much of her winning on clay, and I'm sure I'm going to go into that part of the season with sky-high expectations of her, as I'm sure she will probably of herself. She'll be expecting to win on that surface, considering how much she's won. But I just can't get a sense of whether these sorts of tournaments and matches are going to transfer to that clay court season again. If I had to say right now, I would probably expect yes, and yet I would probably expect that to again feel weird at the time. Like, I don't know. I just don't feel like we've had a player be like a dominant world number one and then sort of be as kind of vulnerable as she seems right now without anything like hugely having sort of happened. There's no like sort of big injury you can point to or big moment in time where you sort of think everything changed. Maybe the Olympics, and there's still some kind of sort of people pointed to that, didn't there? Sort of Olympics hangover. I suppose the drugs ban as well. There have been things, but I don't know. Like I thought that time would sort of help with some of those, and yet the game does feel still a little bit stuck under Wim Fissette.
Yeah, I have exactly the same experience. You've described it really well there. Matt, a tight minute on Amanda Anisimova. She was the defending champion last week. Retired in the third against Karolina Pliskova. Illness was the reason given. She looked to me like she was maybe struggling with a few things. It wasn't the most reassuring Amanda Anisimova situation, I didn't think. How worried are you?
She plays Krejcikova today in Dubai, which is a tough old draw. I would have thought. Not big picture worried. I do think there was a continuation from what we saw at the Australian Open, where there's a lot of stress in her matches at the moment in this year, and maybe that's change of status, and as we talked about last week, knowing she's got a lot more to defend this year. There's more pressure, there's more expectation. I don't know, that's purely speculation on my part, but she doesn't quite seem to have the freedom in these matches that she was playing with for a lot of last year. Pliskova played really well and got that second set back and pushed her, and you just never felt like Anisimova quite had the same resilience in this match that she had last year. It was more stress rather than, right, I'm going to dig in and fight and find a way to win this. There did seem to be some physical issues, that she had a medical timeout sort of on her ab region, I would say, and then retired, as you said, due to illness. So it's not great, of course, but last year she won Doha and then conked out first match in Dubai. Maybe she can flip the script.
Karolina Pliskova being a thing in 2026 is taking some adjusting to. Anyone else experiencing that?
Yeah, and then she retired in her next match against Muchova.
You didn't see coming.
She's from my BT Sport commentating days, and I stopped doing that 7 years ago.
I feel like, even though it feels like so long ago that she lost in Doha, I feel like we have to touch upon Coco Gauff, because another really worrying defeat for her. Well, maybe not even defeat, worrying performance from her. 4-2 to Elisaveta Cocciaretto. We had a real breakthrough week, by the way, Cocciaretto. Matt, you texted the group during this match that I think we were all watching, or certainly multi-screening, saying Gauff's game is in an absolute state. And yeah, I couldn't put it better. Like, her game was in a state in that match. Is she testing your Coco Gauff is never as high as you think and never as low as you think theory? Because although I kind of back her mentally to not be too low, her game does feel pretty low at the moment. Like, the game is a problem.
And it feels like the longest chunk of time maybe in her career that the game has been a problem. Like, if you think back, it's really ever since Wimbledon last year that you've looked at the game and thought, ooh, dear, that's not in a particularly good state. She's had some moments since then, notably the United Cup, where things started looking a bit better, back end of last season as well, but certainly not for any consistent length of time. She's never really played well in Doha, and if you look at her season, it is following a similar trend to last year. Good at the United Cup, quarterfinal loss in Australia, losing early in Doha. I think
she
in terms
did
of
say that thing once, didn't she, David? I feel like you were there for this, where she did make a quip in a press conference once about how little she cares about the Middle East swing.
Actually, it was my recollection was that it was after the US Open, as in terms of right. Well, the rest of the year is about improving my game because it's kind of like I've already been there and done that, and I've already won a Grand Slam as well. You know, she wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but she was trying to see a bigger picture of I want to see improvements in my game, not just results, because I know I can get results because of all of the other things in my game, the athleticism, the mental strength, and there are some good parts of my game. I think that the concerning thing for me would be not only does the forehand and the serve look problematic, but she's not finding ways to win the last two matches or even be competitive in them. I mean, I do think Cocciaretto is a bit of a nightmare opponent. This is a woman who beat Jessica Pegula at Wimbledon, an informed Jessica Pegula. She's a very dangerous player, and she played really well in this match. And she's such a bundle of good energy that I think if you're feeling bad, it probably makes you feel worse, seeing how happy she looks down the other end. But even so, she just looked lost. She looked bereft, and that must be very strange for her because she never looks like that to me, really, very often.
Yeah, like you can see what she's trying to do on the serve at the moment, in that she's got it to a passable phase. It's no longer a weapon, which is a shame because at her best, her serve was a real weapon for her. But there weren't many double faults. It was kind of reliable and serviceable, but it was a point starter essentially. But I can see that that's a stopgap measure en route, hopefully, to a better serve. The forehand, unfortunately, was absolutely dreadful in this match, and so many different types of miss. It's not like she's got
That's
one miss that she can work on. Sometimes it's going in the bottom of the net. It's ballooning long, it's shanking wide, the footwork looked poor on it, like it was just bad, and that seeped into her backhand as well. But as David said, the lack of grit and fight, and I remember her saying after the Svitolina loss in Melbourne, she said after the first set she wasn't that worried because she thought, okay, I've been here before, I can get it back together. But it never came in the second set, and actually things got worse, and that's what happened again here. And that ability, if she doesn't have that ability to sort of win ugly and win when she's not at her best, that is going to change sort of Coco Gauff as a player, because she needs that, because she doesn't have a reliable enough game to always be playing well. But she's so good at winning when she's not at her best. But that's what's been missing, I would say, in the last two matches. That ability to turn a match around when she's not going well. And yeah, it's definitely concerning, that element.
In the doubles, Danilina and Krunic, the Australian Open beaten finalists, they came from 6-love, 5-2 championship point down to beat Shea and Ostapenko in the final. Love 6, 7-6, 10-8, their second title together as a team. And they've lost 5 finals, including that Australian Open one. So this was a much needed breakthrough for them. They took out Stefani again, David.
Yeah.
Becoming
in for that.
A bit of a nemesis team.
Yeah, that's two matches, big matches that Stefani and Dabrowski have failed to come out on top of against those two. And yeah, they need to get their act together, really, because they're the team of the tennis podcast for 2026. Matt Roberts and I are following every move.
Yeah, there were several quite consequential singles and thrilling singles matches happening at one point last week, but David was exclusively streaming Gabby Dabrowski and Luisa Stefani, which was amazing.
Correct.
Right, that's it for part 1. We'll be back in part 2 to talk about the 3 men's events that took place last week. Welcome back to part 2 of today's tennis podcast. 3 men's events to discuss from last week. Rotterdam, Dallas and Buenos Aires. All 3 finals featured the number 1 seed against the number 2 seed. That's got to be, at the very least, extremely rare, if not unprecedented.
It hadn't happened since 1981. the ATP
Well,
said.
Of course, you've got the stats.
45 years.
Wow.
Yeah, wild, right? And a big week for like the latter end of the top 10. You know, a lot of these finals were those guys: Auger-Aliassime, Fritz, de Minaur, Shelton.
That's what they need to do, isn't it? Weeks when Sinner and Alcaraz aren't playing and you've got 500s, so decent amount of points on offer, you have to clean up. If you're not Alcaraz or Sinner, you have to make the most of not having to play Alcaraz or Sinner, right? And them not playing as well, so you're essentially making up ground. And that is exactly what Alex de Minaur did this week in Rotterdam, and Felix Auger-Aliassime up until the final. 3-2, de Minaur won the final. A Felix Auger-Aliassime by the final that did not look physically right at all. A hip injury, I think, that he was struggling with. Real shame. Kind of took the sting out of this as a match. Still a great week for Felix Auger-Aliassime. Really, this title was won by de Minaur when he beat Bertik van der Zandschulp. Can anybody argue with that? That was the match.
It turned out. I didn't expect that to be the case at the time, but yes, that was the closest he was run, wasn't it? But I think he, more than any of the others, is the one that I think that applies to, of making hay whilst Alcaraz and Sinner just aren't there. I mean, he'd lost the last two finals of this tournament to those two, and I know that's only one tournament, but that has been the story of his life for the last 3 years, really. He has made incremental improvements every single year. He has got to be the most consistently improving player, I think, of the pack, and a player that I every year I think, no, that's it. He's got the most out of this game now. It's got nowhere else to go, and every year it seems to me that he finds a little something else extra. I mean, he was absolutely awesome in this Rotterdam tournament. I mean, he started off, the first match was against Artur Fils, who's obviously my favourite player, but who's coming back from injury, but who absolutely came out rocking the ball in the first set, and de Minaur just stayed with him and then just wore him down, as a pro who hasn't had a long layoff would do. But it's also just the manner in which he has made what I consider to be the improvements, which is to just not back up off that baseline. And look, he tried to do it against Alcaraz at the Australian Open, and I thought he was hitting incredibly well at times in that match. It's just Alcaraz has another level. It's like these guys have a Grand Slam level that they bring to the table that is just not something that players experience facing the rest of the time. But you stick de Minaur indoors where the ball can't move around and the spin doesn't take quite such a control of a match, and he's just parrying the ball with his forehand and bunting the ball on his backhand. Everything's going as flat as a pancake, and he's just not taking a backward step. And yes, I accept Auger-Aliassime was compromised, but he was still hitting the ball incredibly well, and de Minaur was just timing it back and turning defence into attack. And I just think it was a brilliant win. I mean, I'm just really happy for him. It's been one of those weeks where I found all the title winners kind of joyous. Muchova, obviously, we'll come on to talk about the other two, but de Minaur, I want him to experience glory at a tournament. I want to see him holding a trophy, because so often he plays brilliantly and does himself proud and has just been duffed up by Sinner or Alcaraz. And I find it kind of not. I mean, look, he's having a great career. He of all players, he's got nothing to feel regrets about because he couldn't do any more. But I want him to get these moments because he deserves them.
Matt, you watched Daniil Medvedev lose round one to Ugo Humbert. He had a rant about the balls mid-match, albeit a rant that seems to have some fairly solid foundations. He's got the backing of some other players, but in terms of the performance and the general vibe, you described it as a very 2025 Medvedev performance. Are we seeing a regression on the signs of #growth that we thought we were seeing from Daniil Medvedev under the tutelage of Thomas Johansson?
Potentially. I mean, look, Humbert indoors round one is a very difficult draw. I would say that, but I think the sign of regression is that, and why this felt like 2025 to me, is that it was going against him and he lost his head rather than actually digging in and finding his game and winning the match, which we did see at the back end of last year. He started to do that again. Even the start of this year, there was I think of the Marajan match at the Australian Open. Okay, he didn't have his game and he was 2 sets down, but he suddenly refocused and did well to win it. Here, he let this thing about the balls totally derail him, and the direct opposite example is Alex de Minaur, who, as you said, clearly didn't like the balls either and felt that they weren't particularly great and they shouldn't be using them. But he saved those comments for the press conference or
after he'd won,
rather than literally during the match going on some huge rant about the head balls. We shouldn't be promoting them. They're square, not round. And look, I believe the players. These balls are probably bad. They probably aren't great. But I'm sorry, a guy of Medvedev's status and potential and talent, you just can't be letting that totally derail you like that. And yeah, it feels like a step back from a guy who'd been making quite good progress in that front. This was a bit of a joke, really, to behave like that. It was funny, but not helpful.
Stan Wawrinka is back in the top 100. Won a match in Rotterdam that week. That's last week. That's good to see from Wawrinka. Hubert Hurkacz was in a winning position against Alexander Bublik, and in the words of Bublik, he did ace-ace, double fault, ace-ace. What the fuck is that? And they say, I'm the one who has no rhythm. I'm fucking Djokovic compared to him. Bublik went on to win that match and then put in an absolutely shocking performance against Felix Auger-Aliassime. It was like he knew he didn't have a chance of winning because Auger-Aliassim's a proper professional, and he just kind of turned into the clown again, just like he did it against de Minaur in Melbourne. Matt, the Dutch Davis Cup beef continues and, if anything, grows apace. Please, could you fill us all in on the latest aggro developments?
With pleasure. So obviously we had everything I laid out last week in terms of how unhappy Griekspoor was with the sort of Dutch Tennis Federation, calling them all unprofessional. Well, then we had the Dutch losing that tie to India, and then of course their big event, Rotterdam. So all the Dutch media are there, the Dutch players are all there, and they're all getting asked about losing in the Davis Cup to India, and there's this big fallout, and Griekspoor's not been with the team, and well, it has developed, as you say, and I mean, my kingdom for the next Jesper de Jong Tallon Griekspoor match, I will be seated for that because those two seem to absolutely hate each other's guts at the moment. De Jong said he was obviously asked about Griekspoor's comments, and he said, you shouldn't disrespect your country. It's disrespectful. I don't talk to Tallon anyway. If someone treats their teammates like that, I don't need to embrace them. He was asked whether Griekspoor's comments had, any kind of sense to them and whether they checked out for him. And Jesper de Jong said, nonsense. Does he stand up for Dutch tennis? I was there, standing in the Netherlands together with the others who did stand up for Dutch tennis. I'm certainly not pro KNLTB, which I think is the Dutch federation. I also see things that are going wrong and need to improve. But just over a year ago, we were in the Davis Cup final. Are things really that bad? You shouldn't make it bigger than it is what Jesper de Jong said. That was then all put to Tallon Griekspoor. Imagine the journalists having an absolute field day, just jumping from one interview to another. And Griekspoor says, to say I'm disrespecting the country with my comments is a bit rich coming from someone who just lost against the world number 500. So that's the situation in the Netherlands. Meanwhile, Botik van der Zandschulp just sort of no commenting everything.
Is he even noticing what's going on? Probably not. He's zoning out. Oh, wow. The draw gods have got to do us a favour here, haven't they? Those two need to play. The problem is Jesper de Jong's ranking isn't because he keeps losing to the world number 500. Yeah, get your ranking up, Jesper, so that we can see you play Tallon Griekspoor. Griekspoor was asked this week about playing the Gazprom event, wasn't he, in St. Petersburg at the end of last season, and he shrugged and said, basically, big deal. He said, the politicians can do their jobs and I'll do mine. So that's Tallon Griekspoor. Over in Dallas and the ATP 500 event there, Ben Shelton saved 3 match points to beat the remains of Taylor Fritz in the final. 3-6, 6-3, 7-5. Matt, I know you watched this match on a phone in a pub with Billie Jean on your knee. David, in what circumstances did you tune into this match?
I watched it on the big screen, every single ball.
Hey, there's a professional. Tell us about it.
Well, I didn't have Billie Jean around, so. But no, I mean, look, I was really into this event. I kind of when Taylor Fritz talked about it in Melbourne the other week, I was like, what are you bothering about that for? You know, you've got knee tendonitis and you're trying to get yourself back for Dallas. But then I'd forgotten, in a way. I mean, it's a tournament. I think it was staged in New York for a while. I think the same week a few years ago, and that was very poorly attended. This was just bouncing all week long. It was a really good event, certainly on the screen. Anyway, I really enjoyed the atmospheres that were created and so forth. And it's a 500, and I think. I mean, I keep trying to get my head around what Taylor Fritz is doing, what he's thinking, because I was one of the journalists in that press conference with him in Melbourne, and I still don't really understand why you're not just taking more time off to get yourself physically right. And he is absolutely adamant that his physio, who he trusts, believes you can both rehab knee tendonitis whilst playing with it, and rest is only going to do so much good. And I get the sense that from Fritz that it's not just about this ranking thing with Sinner and Alcaraz not playing. He has not won Dallas or this week. He's played it several times. He's got to the semis, and you can see he's like a dog with a bone. He's an incredible competitor. I mean, despite the fact that I question the sense of doing what he's doing, it's incredible to watch him fight and battle and win 4 out of 5 tie-break sets that he played over the course of the week and get to this situation. He beat Giron 7-6 in the third. You know, he's fighting his way past Marin Cilic in 2 tie-break sets, and then against Shelton, I mean, this was another cracking match. Fritz goes 3-love up in the first set. It was one of those where I thought Shelton had lost it in the first 10 minutes by just coming out cold. And because Fritz is so reliable usually on serve, and he wins the set comfortably. Second set, honestly, I'm just expecting it to be straight sets. There's a little dip in Fritz, but by then I think he could have already won the match. I think Shelton was having to hit out of his shoes in order to just kind of stay with Fritz through the first set and a half. And then the whole thing just turned around completely. You went into the third set. Shelton gets himself a break up. I go out for a cup of tea, honestly assuming I'm going to come back in the match and he'll be serving for the match. Next thing you know, it's immediate break back, 3-all. Fritz then gets the upper hand. I mean, atmosphere is just pumping inside the stadium. Most of it pro Shelton. And you get to 3 match points for Fritz, and he's playing solid enough tennis. It's just that Shelton just looks like he's jet propelled when his back is against the wall. He's coming up with shots that are a bit new to me this year from him on the forehand, particularly. If you give him a forehand, he's gonna be prepared to just take it on and not give you another shot. He may miss, but you ain't getting another shot. And he just landed enough for these big serves and big forehands. But even when he then had turned it around and got himself to 40 love, 3 match points, honestly, it still felt on a knife edge, because Fritz won the first point of that game and was still quietly shaking the racket, shaking his fist. And I thought, crikey, Shelton's going to have to hit cold winners here to actually get over the line, because Fritz has decided to lock down into this game, and he was getting everything back, and Shelton was clearly tightening, but eventually one forehand did the job and just fell out of his reach. But it was an amazing scene. It's good tournament.
David's a Dallas guy. I love it.
And Shelton generally, like, he won all of his last 3 matches, didn't he, from a set down? And against, Manarino has been a problem for him in the past, and it delivered again that match, and he turned it around. And I think he managed to turn these matches into the kind of ones where he thrives. Like they became really physical, and they became about delivering your best in the biggest moments, which I think Shelton, certainly on tour and through the first few rounds of slams until he plays a Sinner or Alcaraz, he's so good at that, coming up with the shots he needs to in the biggest moments. And David described those match points. I want to shout out the backhand he hit to save the second one. I've never seen Shelton hit a backhand like that, inside out backhand winner behind Fritz. Fritz must have been fuming at that. He got the ball on the backhand, and Shelton still came up with that winner. I think I like the look of Rotterdam and the way it looks on telly and the style of it. I thought the court there was a bit slow in Rotterdam this week, whereas in Dallas what I liked is I don't really like the really high camera angle that you have. To me, I find that a little bit off-putting, but I loved the speed of the court there, and it felt like it was bringing out these fast, exciting rallies. So you kind of had a bit of everything from the 2 indoor events this week. Yeah, it wasn't quite as sort of every match feeling amazing as Doha, probably because Doha's just a bigger event. I was just sort of more engaged with that. But there were a lot of good matches in Dallas this week, for sure. A lot of 7-6s in the third.
Bit of everything except a win for Flavio Cobolli. My kingdom for a win for Flavio Cobolli. Received a troll text from my dad this week saying, "Are you a Jack Pennington Jones guy now?" after Cobolli's latest defeat. He's got a new tattoo, Flavio Cobolli, Matt, of the Hulk, which in principle I love. Cobolli's comments about the Hulk were part of my journey to becoming a Cobolli guy at the end of last season. It does feel like he's either gone really early with the Hulk tattoo, given results, or really late. He should have got it immediately after that Davis Cup run, or waited until he started winning tennis matches, which is not happening in 2026. Maybe the tattoo is to try and inspire him to better things.
Pretty sure he did get it before the Jack Pennington Jones defeat.
Yeah, that was a low point. David's holding up his Hulk mug. If you were to get a tattoo, David, would it be of the Hulk?
Probably, yeah. I've got all the other things, so
Oh my God, David has produced so much Hulk paraphernalia, like at the drop of a hat. That was extraordinary. Over to Buenos Aires in the ATP 250 there, where Joel Fonseca was the defending champion. He crashed out to Alejandro Tabilo 7-6 in the third. It was a competitive match, but kind of a tough scene from a Fonseca point of view. He said after the match that being the defending champion made him feel tense and he lacked conviction and confidence on the court. Big week coming up for him in Rio this week. The title was won by Francisco Cerundolo. He beat Luciano Darderi 6-4, 6-2 in the final. His first title at home for Cerundolo in his third final in Buenos Aires. He's somebody that I wish I had on my fantasy team, Cerundolo. Like he delivers for you, I think.
He's reliable.
Specifically aimed at Flavio Cobolli, but it's also not not aimed at Flavio Cobolli, David.
And I have to say, I mean, look, these were wonderful scenes. I had this on my second screen because of course it was on exactly the same time as the Dallas final, but I was quite happy to double screen this, and it was a hard fought competitive match. You could see Cerundolo was a bit stressed because this meant an awful lot to him. You know, he'd, as you said, his third attempt at winning a final in Argentina, and finally got over the line, and he fell on his back. You know, he fell with celebration. He was so emotional with his family and with his friends and with a crowd really cheering him on, you know, because he has been a reliable fixture at the top 20, 30 of the game, you know, and better over the last few years. But he still hasn't gone beyond the last 16 of a Grand Slam. And he hasn't reached that many of those either. It feels to me like there should have been more Grand Slam progress for somebody of his skill set and his ability. And I always love listening to him. Even when I attended the press conference after the Zverev match in Melbourne, I thought, God, he's so sensible in the way he kind of just evaluates the match. He's very direct, very straightforward. And he's got this incredible forehand. He's just got a good all-round game. I always remember that match we saw in Paris of him against Holger Rune on court Susan Longlen a few years ago. And he's just tended to fall the wrong side of matches like that over the years. Again, a bit like de Minaur, I just love to see these players get their moment. You so rarely end up with the trophy and end up leaving a tournament just completely happy. And he will do that, and I'm really pleased for him.
And it kind of felt to me a little bit like what they call the Golden Swing, you know, this series of tournaments in South America, which we sort of know is kind of under threat in terms of as we know it because of the ATP's plans and the Masters 1000 event coming in Riyadh. Like it definitely feels like this swing is not probably going to look like it does now in a few years' time. It felt like he was almost playing for South America in a way, and like giving, like having that moment at home, which would have been so visceral. And I think Gaudenzi was there in Buenos Aires as well. He would have been soaking up those scenes, or at least seeing them. And like, I don't know, it just felt a bit sort of bigger than just that single match Cerundolo managing to win in Argentina finally. It just felt like a real moment. It felt like everyone saying, look, this is what tennis in this part of the world can be like. And it's the smallest of the events this week, and yet the passion on display and the crowds that come out, it's always amazing when you just put on Buenos Aires in the winter here, and you get this clay, and you get all these crowds. It is a phenomenal scene, and yes, I think it needs to be packaged more. They probably need to have a bigger event rather than smaller events. But it's such a wonderful swing, this one, and interesting that Darderi also is. I discovered this week, or learned it this week. He was actually born in Argentina, Darderi, and there is a feeling, I think the Argentine Davis Cup captain Javier Frana is like hoping that in a few years' time he might be eligible to play for Argentina, because with all these Italians, he's not really been part of the Italian. He's not really been part of the Italian team, even though he's actually ranked higher than some of them. And there was at the trophy ceremony, Cerundolo went to sit with Darderi, and I think he's quite close with the Argentinian players. So it feels like maybe something could happen there. I don't think he's eligible for a few years because he played in the Olympics for Italy. But yeah, maybe that's one to watch. But yeah, like you had 3 Argentinian players in the semis, Cerundolo winning it. It just felt like a bit of a statement, I suppose, from the Argentinian players. Like, don't forget about us. We've got this amazing swing.
Okay, that's it for part 2. Join us in part 3 for David's favourite news section, Instagram news. Welcome back to part 3 of this week's tennis podcast. But just before we look ahead to the events we got this week in tennis, some bits of news from Instagram this week. David, do just interject with your thoughts as they occur.
This is where I catch up, because I don't know anything about this.
We've had Naomi Osaka, Matt, beefing with Stefanos Tsitsipas' ex-girlfriend. Yeah, that is a thing that happened this week.
Yes, not directly, but she threw some shade towards, well, people with podcasts who've never played tennis. But in particular, making comments about grunting and, why do you find grunting unsportsmanlike and disrespectful, and it gives you the ick? And then it transpired that Tsitsipas's ex-girlfriend has now got a podcast, and she had made those comments that sort of directed at Osaka about the whole Castella incident in Melbourne. So
not Paola Badosa then?
No,
not Paola Badosa.
Forgive them for thinking that, David. Yeah, different one, but pre-Badosa.
Okay.
Yeah. Next bit of Instagram news. Jack Draper has had a very severe haircut.
I saw this, fully in favour.
Someone's made a mistake with the machine.
Yeah. Great move.
David loves it, obviously. I think I'm worried about him. Jack, I hope you're okay. Matt, where do you come down?
I just think he had such great hair. It's
and the thing is,
feels like a shame to me.
Great hair. He loved his hair. Yeah, it'll grow back. Hope you're okay, Jack. It is worth checking out on Instagram if you haven't seen Jack Draper's new haircut. It's definitely an extreme vibe, I would say.
He didn't. He sort of dropped it quite subtly, didn't he? It was in a sort of carousel of images, and you had to go through quite a few of them to get to the new hair. It was a bit hidden.
With the old hair, just to emphasise how extreme the change is. Last bit of news from social media, really sad news actually. The Australian player Destiny Ayava will be retiring from professional tennis at the end of this year. Now, okay, that's not going to shake up the whole tennis world, but the way she announced the news was so profound and sad. She posted on Instagram, 2026 will be my final year on tour playing professional tennis. She said, from the moment I had my first lesson, my entire life was tennis. I often wondered what my life would have looked like if I'd chosen anything else. There was a time in my career when I'd reached the point that comes just before you make your big breakthrough, when the world is at your feet and nothing can touch you. I was 17, unprepared and dangerously naive to the consequences of trusting the wrong people. The trajectory of my career was never the same after that. She goes on to say, sometimes I kept playing because I felt like I owed it to not only myself but to everyone who'd helped me throughout my career. Other times I kept going because I was too scared to start again, or I was bored, or I also didn't know who I was outside of tennis and what my true passion was. I was constantly looking for that thing that gave me peace instead of grief. In other words, tennis was my toxic boyfriend. She goes on to talk about all the many things that tennis has given her. Grateful for the travelling. Some of her best friends have come from the sport. But she says it also took things from me. My relationship with my body, my health, my family, my self-worth. Would I do it all again? I really don't know. But one thing the sport taught me is there is always a chance to start fresh. She said, I want to say a ginormous fuck you to everyone in the tennis community who's ever made me feel less than. Fuck you to every single gambler who sent me hate or death threats. Fuck you to the people who sit behind screens on social media commenting on my body, my career, or whatever the fuck they want to nitpick. And fuck you to a sport that hides behind so-called class and gentlemanly values. Behind the white outfits and traditions is a culture that's racist, misogynistic, homophobic, and hostile to anyone who doesn't fit this mould. She goes on as well. There's more powerful stuff in there. I'm so tremendously sad that that's been her experience of the sport, and obviously that is not everyone's experience, but that is experience that should be listened to and people should be alarmed by, I think. And just very specifically on the gambling, that it feels like one of a number of chickens that's coming home to roost for tennis, right? We're going to come on to talk about Dubai in a moment, and the fact that Iga Swiatek and Aryna Sabalenka have chosen to skip Dubai. They've withdrawn from the tournament, and the tournament director has spoken out about that. He's incredibly displeased and sceptical about the reasons for the withdrawal, and he's calling for change to the rules and greater punishments for players for skipping tournaments. Like these sort of long-range dodgy bets that the sport has been placing, its relationship with gambling, and it's kind of promising of stretching the product of tennis players too thin in terms of its promises to its tournaments. Feels like those chickens are starting to come home to roost in quite a worrying way, to me anyway. The comments from the tournament director in Dubai, Salah Talak, he said the late withdrawals from Sabalenka and Swiatek were a disappointing surprise, and he said the reasons for them were a bit strange. He said he thinks there should be harsher punishments for such withdrawals, and that players should be docked ranking points rather than prize money for skipping mandatory events. Those quotes are from Reem Abalil, reporting in Dubai. Now, look, I completely, David, understand why the Dubai tournament director feels that way, and it's completely legit for him to feel that way. He's paying a license fee to the WTA for a tournament that is mandatory for the top players, for a tournament whose value and the value they're offering to sponsor comes from the headline players largely that are going to feature there. I totally understand his grievance, and yet I think it's totally the right decision for Iga Swiatek and Aryna Sabalenka, and I'm pleased, big picture, that they're not playing, and I don't want to see them punished for such decisions. Like tennis has been writing checks that it can't cash, and now the tournaments are going to start asking them to cash them, and they can't. Like, there isn't that much top tennis player to go around.
Jack Draper was talking to us about this a few months ago, wasn't he? And he's not the first, he's not going to be the last. And the tour's answer to players' concern over being on the road too much and not having any downtime or any time to work on the game is, well, just miss a few. Basically, they might not say that officially, but they're saying you control your own schedule. Yes, that might mean 0 pointers, and yet so they are kind of docked ranking points in that regard. But Sabalenka's view would be, well, I win enough anyway, so I'm just going to game the system that way, and absolutely all power to her, I say. And yes, I do feel sorry for Dubai and fans in Dubai who don't get to see Aryna Sabalenka, but sorry, what do you expect as a sport? You can't have it always. You cannot. And something has to give. So I think this is going to happen more and more. I'm glad that the Dubai tournament director has spoken out. I think it's important, not necessarily against the players, because I don't think the players are at fault here, but making their voices heard so that the organisers of the actual tour have to feel some heat, because they need to understand that this is not going to be sustainable. You should have more and more tournaments disappointed that star players aren't there, and you should have more and more star players unprepared to just play everything because it's not sustainable and it's damaging to their health. And at that point, I hope that pressure from both sides will make the tours and just the sport generally think, oh, well, we better change something then.
Yeah, it feels like the tours have sold a product that they just don't have supply for. Like, I do wonder if there's a legal case in the future. You've paid a license fee for a tournament that's supposedly mandatory for top players, and it's quite clearly not, and shouldn't be. It's a bad situation, and it's brewing into a catastrophic situation. That said, it's still a great field in Dubai. It is a 1,000 event. They have these back-to-back Doha, Dubai 1,000 events on the WTA side. Mirra and Andreeva, the defending champion, this tournament has already kicked off the Sunday start, their Sunday to Saturday events in the Middle East. Rybakina and Anisimova are the top two seeds. The ATP has 500 events in Doha and in Rio. In Doha, Novak Djokovic is withdrawn. He was at the figure skating this week. Do you see that? Him reacting to Ilya Malinin's backflip. It does have Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, though, does Doha, and they're the top two seeds. Alcaraz faces Artur Rinderknecht in his opener, and Jannik Sinner faces Thomas Machac in his. That one is later on today, and that is what we'll all be watching. You've also got Medvedev, Tsitsipas, Rublev, Bublik, Menchik and Karen Khachanov in the Doha draw. Rio has Francisco Cerundolo, Luciano Darderi, João Fonseca and Sebastian Baez. Those are the top four seeds. As I said earlier, big week, it feels like, for João Fonseca. And then there's also the ATP 250 in Delray Beach, where you've got, of course, Taylor Fritz with his 3 injuries. You've got Casper Ruud making his return after becoming a father, Leonard Tien and Flavio Cobolli seeking just a second win of the season. His first he scraped out against a 40-year-old some weeks ago. Come on, Flavio. And you've got round ones that include Mute against Paul. That's a big yes, please, I think, for David. And Vachereau against Mickelson. Vachereau's still on the being picked out in agendas list for now, Matt. But he's on watch, isn't he?
I'm just amused by Vachereau. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do. Our mascot for this week's episode is Enzo. What a lovely face Enzo has. He's owned by Anand. Enzo comes from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He's a 4-year-old golden doodle who loves toys he can fetch or use for tug of war. And he loves walking the streets and running the parks of New York City, smiling, lounging, spooning, sleeping by the fire and sleeping under our 3-year-old's high chair at meal times. That is, Billie Jean has mastered that manoeuvre as well, loitering under a high chair. Enzo looks just a delight. Enzo looks like the kind of dog, David, that you would enjoy throwing tennis balls for in the park and then being brought back.
Epic.
David's rocket launcher right arm. I think both David Law and Enzo would love that. Enzo will be in our newsletter. If you're watching us on YouTube, then you've been looking at Enzo for the past minute. Lucky you. Hello to our mascots. Bodie. It's tough being Cobolli, guys, but we're going to stick with him and his Hulk tattoo.
Did you have Mukova as well, though, Catherine?
Did have Mukova, yeah. It's actually been a great
your fantasy team
week. Let's not let Flavio Cobolli's form sour things. It's been a good week. Dave, good week for you as well, David. Amazing.
Yeah. I had runs for Mboko and Zachary and Fritz. So Fritz, I'm quite happy with you just battering your knee. It's fine.
That's why you're a Dallas guy.
Points for me.
Matt and Roger, you're trucking along, aren't you? Upper mid-table.
Yeah, mixed bag. Bad on the women's side this week. A lot of retirements, but we did have Alex de Minaur, reliable 500 points for me in Rotterdam.
My men, the men on my team, have scored me a total of 40 points all year. Total. It's been a tough season.
Is it?
God.
Hello to our top folks and executive producers, Greg, Chris and Jeff. Matt, could we have some quick shout outs today, because I do have a tooth repair in 14 minutes.
Okay, let's see what we can do. We have Pamela Kennedy from Edinburgh.
Hello,
Hi, Pamela.
like Pamela Howard Shriver.
Hey!
Pamela says, I'm a long-term listener and subscriber, so I think you've probably wrung as much out of my name as possible, confirmed by the unexpected diversion onto John Arnerisa last year.
I remember that.
I know how we got there. Because your surname is Kennedy, which is the surname of an IMG agent I met in Monaco, and he introduced me to John Arnerisa in the pub.
It's amazing. Any other tennis Pams?
Well, no, I mean, it's Pam Shriver, isn't it?
Okay,
and
right,
and Pamela says,
to deliver for Pamela here.
well, I've got something. Pamela says, I'll
Okay.
dedicate my shout out to my lovely partner, Andy, who can probably direct where you might go with his name, because he's well aware that he's my second favourite tennis playing Andy.
Oh, okay. That's perfect. Thank you, Pam and Andy.
Is your first one Murray or Roddick?
Well,
She's
Edinburgh's
from
got to
Edinburgh.
be Murray. We've also got Mallory Mapes Couture from Vermont.
Hi, Mallory.
Hello, Mallory. I'm going to say Molla Mallory, and I think we've had Mallory before, and I said Molla Mallory then, and I think Mallory's going to point that out, isn't she?
She actually doesn't. She's got some dog
Oh.
news, though.
Oh,
Okay.
better.
Recently adopted 2 dogs on the 30th of January.
Oh,
They
congratulations.
are brothers who look almost exactly alike, and they're always thrilled. And I've got the podcast on in my office, and someone brings up their favourite topic, squirrels.
Squirrel. Oh, gosh, you didn't even look up. Need to check on Willie Jean's consciousness before I go and get my tooth chip done. Mallory, thank you very much, and congratulations on your 2 new dogs.
And finally, we have Dennis Curley from Minneapolis.
Hello, Dennis.
And Dennis?
Dennis would like to dedicate this to his partner, Jim. Dennis says, Jim took me to the Australian Open in 2019 for my 50th birthday, a trip of a lifetime.
So cool.
You've got yourself a good in there, Dennis.
And
Yeah.
Dennis says, I'm dedicating this shout out to him now because we've been going together side by side to wave signs, chant and protest the occupation of our city by our federal government. We're together in good times and bad times, and this is sent out in hope of better days to come.
We're thinking of you, Dennis. Yeah. Fight the good fight. Dennis, Jim, Pam, Andy, and Mallory, thank you ever so much for your support of the Tennis Podcast. We are part of the Athletic Podcast Network. Thank you for listening. We'll speak to you next week.